Yeah.
Oh. Hey.
Oh, hello, and welcome back to Nightshift with Andrea Up Late. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Brian Sanders. Brian, how you doing?
I'm wonderful, and I'm looking at the camera.
You're doing so good at that. I'm proud of you.
Yes.
To anyone who's new here, Nightshift is a true crime podcast, but we also are a live YouTube show. So we air every Tuesday night, usually live around 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then if you just want to be an audio listener, we are fully on board with that as well. So you can always listen on Spotify or iTunes or wherever it is that you get your podcast. Tonight's case, I say it every week, but this time I actually mean it. No, this case is wild. And until I started looking into it, I didn't know about it. It's considered one of DC's most insane cases. It's, I guess I'm going to go with unresolved. We've been doing a lot of those lately where they're not necessarily unsolved because we've got a really good idea of what happened. But this one leaves a ton of questions, and I cannot wait to hear y'all's input on this one. Up until 4 minutes ago, I'm still reading more information, just trying my best to, I don't know, get a handle on this case. It's wild. So we're going to talk about that. I would be remiss, though, if I did not mention now, if you guys have been following the Asha Degree case, blown away right now. So we talk about it all the time when we do unsolved cases and, you know, like, is it ever going to be solved? I've always had her in my top 3 to 5 that just are constantly in my brain. I'm always trying to go back to check on updates, see what's going on. And I don't know, like, it makes me actually speechless in the sense that I had gotten, I guess I should say, unhopeful that a development would actually take place. People have died. People have gone to prison. There have been false prison confessions. I believe we spoke on this a little bit last week, but I don't know. I just didn't think, I don't know. I thought this one might go to the grave with everyone. And I hate to even say that, but I don't know. It seems so far removed from anything that was getting ready to be solved. It was out of Shelby, North Carolina. Very quick recap. Asha Degree was a 9-year-old girl who went missing. Her family went to bed, a family of 4. And when they woke up, there were only 3 of them there. The front door was locked. There was no signs of forced entry. Asha was gone. Her backpack was missing. And it was a pouring down thunderstorm, which she was known to have been quite terribly afraid of the dark and of thunderstorms. So there were a couple of bizarre sightings of what looked like a small woman in a white dress. Her nightgown was white. Again, remember, middle of the night, pouring down rain. That could fit the mark. On the highway where she would travel, generally speaking, outside of her house in a rural area on a school bus. So we tossed around the idea of maybe sleepwalking, like what got her out there if not a human? Why would she be out there? I was never under the impression that she was running away. Or that she had been groomed and taunted to leave. Like that's some of the suspicions people have. That's never quite seemed, I don't know, what I felt was consistent with the story. There was a weird talk of a dark green car that would match the description of like a 70s model, early 70s model Oldsmobile or Thunderbird. And the FBI actually listed it as a vehicle in question, but never explained why. Then there were rumors that she was either seen getting into or forcibly put into a car that matched that appearance. And you got to think this was the year 2000. So that car would have been, you know, easily spottable. It would have stood out at that time. Mm-hmm. If you were just tuning in right now live, we are not covering Asha Degree. I'm just doing a recap on some new developments there. In saying that, that's that. 18 months later, her backpack was found double bagged in trash bags about 30 miles from her home. Obviously, this reignited the investigation, and they did what they were supposed to do. So what we know that we talk about all the time is we talk sometimes about ineptness, we talk about negligence, we talk about inexperience, and then we talk about the cases where law enforcement has been consistently working it just very quietly. So if you don't know that they're working it, doesn't mean that they're not. And it sounds like that's consistently what's been happening here. And with advancements in DNA technology, we talk about it every single week. They've been able to go back through, retest that backpack. We didn't know initially that that's how this came to be. They did. That brought out two pieces of DNA. One was a piece of hair. They haven't told us the other piece. which took them back to a property where two different people are connected by this one big family that gets into a whole lot of other weird stuff. Check it out. Look at the updates. Police did a major, an FBI, North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, major search last Tuesday and Wednesday, the 10th and 11th of September, I believe, were the dates. Hauled off just multiple items. I mean, you can't even imagine the amount of, there were spectators. People came, I think there were at one point 50 different just citizens in cars in a field across the street watching as this took place. They had cadaver dogs out there. They have said that they do in fact think that Asha unfortunately was met with homicide, which I think by this point we all kind of figured something like that unfortunately had taken place. And they do name Roy Lee Deadman, owner of that property, as a potential suspect in this case. One way or another, if he was not a part of the actual crime, it does look like he at least was involved in some information, some knowledge of it all at the very least. But obviously that's yet to be seen. But they're making big moves on it. So they actually just made public the search warrant, affidavit and all the things that was included or that were included within that. As of this afternoon, it was out to the public. So anyway, I'm sorry I just threw all that at you real quick, but it's a really big deal. And it's just not often, unfortunately, that we get to come on and talk about something like this. That's such a big deal and such a breaking, piece of information in a case that has been unsolved for so long. This is 24 years in the making. Again, Asha was 9 years old when she went missing and her remains have never been found. So just anyway, keep abreast of that situation and see what's going on. And we will keep you posted as soon as we have more updates. Moving forward, the case tonight takes place out of Washington, D.C. In the year 2006. So again, did you know of this case?
Mm-mm. I've never heard of it.
I had not either. And I'll tell you what, it surprises me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I am a bit surprised about this. So
yeah,
we're going to dive in. I cannot wait to hear what you guys say about this. As always, it'll be on Instagram on Andrea up late after tonight's show. We'll put pictures up and descriptions and those kinds of things. But if you are a listener of Nightshift, you know that we like to cover pop culture that was going on in the year that the case we were highlighting took place. So again, this was 2006. I don't like the early 2000s very much,
No.
Brian. It's not a lot of fun, really.
And you shouldn't.
It's bland.
As far as like pop culture goes and music and stuff, it's kind of hit or miss.
All right, what you got?
Well, right off the bat, you always want to know what the worst vehicle is. You ask me this all the time. I know so much about cars.
They hauled away a green vehicle matching the description. Sorry.
Oh.
ADD is wild tonight. The description in the Asha case that the FBI had said, that's what I was leading you guys back to. They actually hauled away a car that very closely resembles that car. It had been tarped under a garage and it had front end damage, which could potentially align with what we had discussed, unfortunately, that maybe she was out on her own accord or otherwise, and accidentally, there could have been an accidental hit and run that turned into a cover-up.
Yes.
Either way, go ahead. Sorry about that.
This is, I think Bosco one time told us it was his favorite vehicle too. The Jeep Compass.
Well, now what's the No. Nope.
I don't know. When I saw Jeep, I just
So
stopped.
is it going to look like a Tic Tac? Is it going to look like not like a square, like a CJ, like a Jeep? Like it's just
or
Jeep
like the old
brand,
Isuzu Troopers. How cool those were.
like a Tic Tac.
Yeah, I don't even know. I didn't even bother to really look up any images.
Okay,
I stopped when it said Jeep.
Go along. Move along.
Audrey Hepburn posthumously appears in a Gap commercial.
Weird.
While dancing to AC/DC's Back in Black.
Do you think she'd approve?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
Who gets the rights to what happens with my AI body when I'm dead?
That is a good question because they pulled footage from a 1957 film called Funny Face and then created a commercial. So I guess her family, whoever owns, I guess that would be a movie company.
It's her soul.
I don't know. Either way, that's
I don't know.
interesting. Taylor Hicks. Do you know that name?
Listen, go for it, and I'll continue on.
Taylor Hicks won this would have been the 5th season of American Idol, but by then it was the biggest show on TV.
Which is wild. And I forget how much fun it was. I know a lot of people still watch a lot of those shows. I don't watch a lot of those like contest shows these days. They're still cool or whatever, but I do remember that. And actually, a buddy of mine, Lauren Conlon, she actually has, oh gosh, I don't want to get it wrong. Primetime Crime is her new crime podcast. And she is also a journalist and an advisor on a lot of different shows, Nancy Grace and different ones. But she just last week had Taylor on her show, not her crime show, her entertainment show. And so a lot of us were in the chats, and that was a lot of fun. And it was kind of fun to see him out there talking about stuff. That's funny.
So yeah, so he won that year. High School Musical was, I guess, the big hit for kids.
Oh, yeah.
And it introduced the world, I guess, to Zac Efron.
Yeah.
I don't know. And Hannah Montana / Miley Cyrus was like, I guess, dominating pop culture for some listeners because they maybe were a little bit younger. Maybe they were young back then.
Yeah, I think a good bit of our listeners would have hit that age gap, that age category of age gap. I hit the age gap. Like a jump. It's like an age, like a ravine, like a canyon.
Did you want to keep going?
Go ahead, yeah.
MySpace was the big social media platform.
I had a Ben Harper song on my MySpace.
Because you're cool.
I don't know about that, but I do remember MySpace.
I remember a friend of my brother's had Jerry Rafferty as his song with a lot of like pictures. Couldn't you put like a montage or whatever? Yeah. It was cool.
It had like a black background. It was pretty cool, actually. Yeah.
Do you want to know what the Jerry Rafferty song was that he had up?
Oh, of course I do.
I can't remember right now. What's it called? Baker Street.
Okay.
All right. Shipping Up to Boston, Dropkick Murphys was the song of 2006 in my book. No, it was actually pretty famous, and a lot of people still talk about that song because it was in the movie.
What was the song?
Shipping Up to Boston.
Rudy.
Oh, no. No.
I was thinking of something Irish.
That's a good guess. It was in the movie The Departed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that kind of like a lot of people listen to Dropkick Murphys before then, but man, after that, it kind of boosted them on up there.
Bosco said Bosco got divorced in 2006.
Oh, hey.
If you're new here, we are, like I said, a live YouTube show, so you can get in the chats. It's free. Just sign into YouTube. Again, that's free. And then we can converse a little bit at the beginning of the show and then again at the end, and you can ask questions and talk about the case in the meantime.
All right. No, but it was in the movie The Departed, which takes place in South Boston, which is also home of New Kids on the Block. I just had to work it in there. All right. And that's all I got for pop culture. There's just not a whole lot.
Well, I've only got my pinky is black.
Mm-hmm.
Left-handers unite. You know, it's a Tuesday when my hand looks like this because I've been writing. Alrighty, so let's get to it. Oh, my stars. All right, guys, let's do this. So this is going to be the case of the murder of Robert Wone. It's W-O-N-E, and that is how it seems to be pronounced. So Robert Eric Wone was general counsel. He had gotten a new job. So this is DC 2006, okay, for Radio Free Asia. He was president-elect of the Asian Pacific American Bar Association in DC. He was a lawyer, and he was general counsel to the Organization of Chinese Americans. He was born in New York City in 1974. He was the oldest of two boys. He was a fourth-generation Chinese American. He had families all around in Brooklyn and all in the Northeast. And so he eventually moves on up the ranks. The thing to know about Robert is he was said to be extremely compassionate, extremely kind, a lot of fun, really kind guy. And he was into everything. When I was telling Brian a little bit about the case earlier, or who am I kidding? A lot. We were talking a lot about it earlier today,
Mhm.
but in speculating on some things, I just at one point said I'm not sure how he would even had time for that because he had his hands in everything. At every turn, you can read pages on Robert was heading up a new organization or was becoming president-elect for this foundation or, a new initiative for this job. So he was really in it to win it and a really successful guy. So he attended College of William and Mary, and he was a Monroe Scholar. He majored in public policy and became active in student government. And that is when he met someone named Joseph Price. So if you got your whiteboard out, Joseph Price is going to be our first name to remember. So he's, again, I've got document after document that discusses all the clubs and organizations that he belonged to. But he joined Covington and Burling in Washington, D.C. in the year 2000 as an associate, focusing on employment law and commercial real estate. Okay, so that was his jam. Interesting fact, who else worked at Covington and Burling at that time was Eric Holder.
Oh, okay.
So in 2002, Robert met Catherine Ellen Yu, and they were at a conference in Philadelphia. She's also an attorney. And so evidently they flew back and forth between, Chicago and DC and eventually got married the following year in June of 2003. They were known to have a happy marriage in 2006. Again, it's only 3 years married, but there were no accounts of any disturbances there or any waves within their marriage. So I mentioned to you that he went to school with a man named Joseph Price. He goes as Joe. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Joe. Joe, I said they were in school together. So Joe was also a lawyer. Okay. And so Joe was there in DC, hustling and bustling, kind of the slick back type, the kind of, to me, in the picture is kind of a schmoozer, kind of a, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
He might could sell you a bridge in Arizona. Right. So, he was very active in the gay rights community in DC. So there was kind of a pocket in 2006, kind of getting a stronghold in DC there. And he was very, very active in that type of a movement. He was the past president of the UVA Gay and Lesbian Alumni Association. He went on and was part of General Counsel for Equality Virginia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So personally, Joe Price was in DC for over a decade at this point. And he had been for most of that time in what they would consider a domestic partnership. This is before gay marriage with Victor Zaborski. Okay. So Joe and Victor moved around a few different areas, Capitol Hill, Swan Street, 16th Street, you name it, in DC. So they had been together for quite some time and considered themselves essentially married. Okay. So they are together, but then you start to learn about some, now the term would be the polyamory, right? But they would start to be open to the idea of having someone else included in their relationship. So in 1998, Joe Price joined Arndt Fox and became a partner there in 2006. So in the year that this case took place is the year that he actually made partner there at that firm. Okay. So I told you that Joe was in a relationship with a man named Victor. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Victor Zaborski. It's good just to get a little background on some of these folks as we move into the story, okay? So in August of 2006, which is precisely the month and year that this case takes place, Victor Zaborski was the senior marketing manager for the Milk Processors Education Program. Okay, so it'd be Milk PEP was the acronym. This was actually a big promotional component of the International Dairy Foods Association. It was based out of Washington, D.C. In fact, Victor headed up the Got Milk campaign. So if you remember all the magazines, all the commercials, remember Got Milk, and every model and celebrity and athlete, would be on, it's kind of like being on the Wheaties box, I think at that time would be a comparison. And so that's kind of Victor's claim to fame, was the Got Milk stuff, right? So he was very involved in that. Now, so we also have someone in the picture here named Dylan Ward. Okay. So Dylan in 1992 graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown. He had a bachelor's degree in foreign service. Then he went to a culinary institute. He got that degree. He also got involved in books. And so he actually authored and illustrated multiple children's books. The House of the Tiger Ant was based in Taiwan, and that was like an educational publishing business that he headed up in Taiwan. Okay. So he actually received quite a few awards for some of his children's books that he wrote and illustrated. But as you can see from the things I just listed, like Foreign Service, culinary school, author, illustrator, Dylan is kind of all over the place. So while we have our main character here, Robert, who is ultimately our victim in the story, who is a lawyer, his buddy Joe, who's a lawyer, Joe's husband, Victor, who was in that big promotional campaign for the Dairy Association, right? The milk stuff. But then we got Dylan, who I can't say wasn't focused, but he just kind of didn't stick at one thing for too long. Okay. So that gives you a rundown. So let's describe now kind of what we had going on romantically and in this home in DC on Swan Street. Okay. So we have what can get a little convoluted, but all of this is going to be very important when it comes to like the crux of this case, the actual murder that took place. So like I said, Joe and Victor are in a partnership together. Okay. So they are like essentially married. Dylan is living in the home with them on Swan Street. This is a 3-level, which we're going to break down in a moment, row house. Okay. So Dylan is on his own. These two are married. Now, like I said, they were open to inviting maybe someone else in. And at this point, Dylan was a pretty big part of their relationship. So we don't really have a lot of accounts, though, of Victor and Dylan being together. This was more of an outlet for Joe. So Joe and Dylan kind of had their own thing going on extra to Victor. Now, when asked about it, Victor will say like that they were working on integrating him into being more into their relationship as a part of like a family. So Victor looked at it, even though Dylan was mainly spending his time with Joe, Victor looked at it like the three of them were a family unit. So he wasn't necessarily bothered by this. It's something that they were all agreeing to. So if you picture row houses, okay, so you're downtown DC, you're just what it's going to sound like, right? Like it's like $1 million row house. 2 blocks over could be bad side of town. 2 blocks over, another $1 million set of row houses, right? So these row houses, they're all connected. So think kind of narrow. Actually, I've got a picture. Narrow, vertical, and most of them like 3 levels, like I said. But when I say connected, let me show you if you are watching tonight or at all on YouTube. Let's see here. There we go. So this is an idea. This is actually a picture of Swan Street. That middle house is the one where this case took place. But you can see what I mean, that you've got that red brick one, the one in the middle, the one on the left. But so they're connected by walls. Okay. That's important because when you hear people talking about living in them, they're beautiful and sure, it's brick walls. They're also old. You know, that's part of their charm, part of their beauty, I think. But also because of all of this, you've got creaky stairs, really, really creaky stairs. You've got investigators have come back to say that actually. The lead prosecutor on this case, we're going to get to all that later. He went back to visit the house where this case took place. And he even said immediately, oh, these stairs have been replaced. You know, he said they don't creak. When this all took place, these were very creaky wooden stairs. That's important. Also, what's important is that you can hear from house to house kind of if you're near those walls. So I have accounts of people talking about living next to people in a van or just simply a baby crying. And you're going to be able to hear what's going on with your neighbor. So that's how that was. Now, if you picture that house, the arrangement of rooms were as follows. The bottom level is just consider that your main living area. Okay. So like your living room, your kitchen, all of your living space there. Then you go up a flight of stairs. That's your second floor, the middle floor. And on that floor is where Dylan's bedroom was. So Dylan's bedroom and like an office are on that second floor. And then you go up another flight of stairs. And that's where Joe and Victor had their bedroom. So they're up top, Dylan's in the middle, living space is down below. At each level was separated by a small landing. So if you climb the stairs to the second floor, you could look down to the first and so on and so on. So On the night in question that we will be talking about, in August of 2006, Victor got home from a work trip in Denver. Now, he was able to catch an earlier flight and was not expected to come home till just a few hours later. So it's not like he wasn't coming home days and days earlier, but a little earlier than had been expected. So he gets home, and when he gets home, he puts his things away and sees Dylan. Dylan's working out in their home garage. So he asked Dylan about where Joe is. He learned Joe was at the gym. So this has always been a little interesting to me, this bit of a timeline. But we're going to touch on their relationship too here a little bit more, maybe some more nuances of it that weren't really immediately seen. So he asked Dylan where Joe is. He said he's at the gym. So Victor says that he put his things away and kind of got back in his car and went to the gym. Or not car, I don't know how he got there. He may have just walked there. But either way, it was not the gym within their home. So he leaves to go find Joe at the gym. He said he was gone for about 30 or 35 minutes, did not see Joe there, and comes right back. Well, when he gets back, Joe has gotten back home. And he was working on, there's a shower on the third floor that evidently had a leak. So like they had a ladder up against that wall. There was a leak, and they continue to talk about, as this case goes on and their interviews go on, this hose, that there was some hose that Joe was working on to try to figure out if you can kind of shower with that in the meantime, or figure out the leak. You're going to hear about this hose and the leak a lot, to the point that it almost feels like forced conversation. It's a little interesting, but that's where Joe was when Victor got home. So they haven't seen each other. Remember, Victor's been on a work trip in Denver. So Victor gets back home. Joe's messing around, per Victor's account, with this hose shower situation. Dylan is taking his own shower, and they're getting ready to go on and have dinner. So Victor changes clothes, and they are going to have dinner. So he talks and will say that they were going to have steaks. Then he gets a phone call. The steaks burn. He goes outside. He had seen a plume of smoke. He stops the steaks. They proceed to go on and sit down. They have dinner. He'll say that between the three of them, they share a bottle of wine, nothing excessive. And then that's about it. They kind of go get cleaned up and ready for bed. They talk in the kitchen for a moment, have some water. And then he'll talk about just going upstairs to retire to the bed to just flip channels. He said he was tired. And everybody kind of goes to their rooms. Okay. So at this point, once Victor goes up to his room, he said this is only just around 10 or so. It was kind of an earlier night for them. And when he goes up, Victor doesn't ever come back down until much later. And then he kind of has differing accounts whether or not he saw Dylan. Like when he went upstairs, he will say very specifically that he knew that Dylan's door was shut, but the light was on. But he'll say, I don't know if he was awake, if he was reading. Dylan wasn't much into TV, so he read a lot. So Victor's assumption was that Dylan was just in his room reading a book. And he seems pretty certain that Dylan's door was shut. This is an important detail. And he says that because he says that Joe had been kind of fussing at them. It had been really hot in the house. And that Joe had been telling all of them, try to keep the bedroom door shut because I think we can keep the bedrooms cooler with the AC that way. So because of that knowledge or that memory, he thinks that Dylan's door was shut. All right. So per Victor, he and Joe are chilling in the bed, flipping channels. And there comes a time when he has to get up to get something. He goes downstairs. This is when he sees Dylan making a bed. He's got the pull-out couch in the office on that second floor where Dylan's bedroom is, and Dylan's making it up. And so he asks him what he's doing, and Dylan said, oh, Robert's coming over. He's staying the night here, and he and Joe are getting breakfast in the morning. Well, Victor this wouldn't have been a big deal, really. He knew Robert. It's his husband's old college friend. They knew who each other were. This really wouldn't be a very big deal. This wasn't spontaneous. In fact, Robert had this trip or had this overnight planned for a couple of weeks. In fact, before he left home, his wife, Kathy, said, don't forget, you're staying with Joe tonight. And he was like, oh, yeah, Joe. So he had actually called a couple other people to hang out with or to spend the night with. It wasn't that Joe was his last resort. It's just he was kind of calling to see what stuck, and Joe was available. So they had this arrangement already planned out. I don't know if it slipped Joe's mind to tell Victor about this. But later we'll talk about the fact that this might have actually perturbed Victor a little more than they seem to talk about in interviews and whatnot. So particularly because not only is he just now finding out that his husband's buddy's coming to spend the night tonight, but he's finding out from husband's lover, right? Like there just kind of is a closeness there that Dylan's the one putting the bed sheets on. Dylan has this information that Victor doesn't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what's going on. He goes back up, flipping channels. He's in the bed with Joe, and they get a call that Robert is on his way. Well, eventually Robert gets there. We do have a pretty solid timestamp of events in the sense of when he got to the home. So whenever, and I'll tell you in a moment where we narrow down when his death took place, but we know that he clocked out of work. He left his work at 10:18 p.m. So that's a definite. So they say that he got to their house around 10:30ish. So that would 10:30, 10:35, that would play out. So all of that makes sense. So Robert gets there, and Victor will say that he didn't go downstairs. He said he'd already undressed for the night. I'm thinking he's probably a little irritated. He doesn't really care to get back up and go greet this guy that he didn't even know was coming until right now. So Joe does go downstairs and greet him, and evidently Dylan is awake. And at some point later, Joe comes back to bed. So like I said, Robert arrives around 10:30, 10:35 p.m. And Robert had no idea that he would be dead no more than 79 minutes later. So per Victor, he said that Robert said that he was going to go. Joe had told them that Robert said he's going to take a shower and go to bed. So the reason Robert was there, in case there are any questions, is that Robert had recently gotten that job that I told you about. The job, I'm going to make sure I say it in the correct order, Radio Free Asia. And he wanted to meet, he had a pretty high up, so he was general counsel there. So he wanted to meet some people who worked on a shift that he didn't work on. So he stayed late that night purposefully to be able to meet some of the other employees, right? So just kind of being in a good leadership position. So in doing that, instead of making the commute back home late, he just said, Joe and them live right here in DC. I'll just crash with them. So that's and it was a good way to catch up with old friends. So he and Joe had plans, like I said, to go eat breakfast the next morning. So that's kind of the reason that Robert had come to stay with them that night. So now is when the madness starts. Okay. Victor says that he heard a scream and that he and Joe rushed toward it. Okay. There they go down to the second floor and find Robert on the bed, unresponsive. And Victor calls 911. Now this is at 11:49 p.m. If you remember, Robert got to their home around 10:30, 10:40, 10:35, around 11 o'clock. Retired to bed, and this is only 49 minutes later. So let me go in and play for you now this 911 call, and we are going to discuss it. It's a little bit long. I'm going to play it for you this way because I think you're going to be able to hear it more. But okay, here it goes.
DC Emergency 911 Operator 6752. Do you need police, fire, or ambulance? We need an ambulance. What's wrong,
This is Victor.
We had someone that was in our house, evidently, and they stabbed somebody. Okay, somebody's inside the house now? I don't know. We heard. Are they bleeding? You see someone bleeding? Someone is bleeding in our house. Okay, where's they bleeding from? I think in the stomach. The stomach? Is he conscious? Calm down for me. I'm going to send some help, okay? Female or male? It's a male. He's a friend of ours. He's spending the night with us. Okay, and who was the person that stabbed him? Do you know? Is he conscious? We need an ambulance. Ma'am, listen to me. He's not conscious. He's not conscious at all? No. We need someone right now. Is he breathing? Listen to me. Calm down. I'm going to help you, okay? Is he breathing? I'm upstairs, and he's downstairs. I don't know. Okay, who's downstairs with him? My partner is downstairs with him right now. He told me to go upstairs and call the police immediately. I just went upstairs. Okay, who's the person? Okay, I'm sending paramedics and the police. Okay, who's the person that stabbed him? I don't know. We think it's somebody with an intruder in the house. We heard a chime at the door. Okay, ma'am, calm down. 1509 Swan Street, Northwest. Am I correct? Yes. The person that said something, she's still in the home? I don't know. We got help en route, okay? Pardon me? We have help en route. Thank you. I'm here. They are en route to you now. I'm saying the police and the paramedics, okay, to assist. Okay, what I need you to do is go downstairs, okay? The place wherever he was stabbed at, I need you to get a dry cloth, okay? And just apply pressure to that area. If he was wherever he was stabbed at on his body, I need you to take a towel downstairs while you're waiting for the paramedics to arrive and just apply pressure. Even if the rag or towel is saturated with blood, just get another towel and put it on top, but never lift the first towel off the area. Hold it on. Once it gets filled up with blood, just put another towel on top of that and just apply pressure until the paramedics arrive. Yeah. On the leg. Yeah. In the heart. In the heart? Yes. In the center of his chest. Okay. Is he breathing? Is he breathing? We have help en route now, okay? You don't know who it was? No idea. Don't touch this. Okay, is he breathing? He's breathing, but he needs help now. Okay, we have help en route, ma'am, okay? We do have help en route. Okay, just go down there and try to tell your husband or your other half to just try to keep him calm and talk to him, okay? Keep him calm and talk to him until someone gets there. Okay. And at the same time, get a dry cloth and just hold it right there in the area. My partner's holding the holding it on it. Okay, and once it gets saturated with blood, tell him get another one. Go get another towel so you can apply it on top of that one once it gets filled up with blood. We need you to apply pressure on that area. He is applying pressure, right? Okay, just hold it there until the paramedics get there. They should be pulling up any moment. If they're already en route to your location, you don't know who did this. We have no idea who did this. Is the door open so they can get in? We don't know how they got in. Okay, well, I'm asking you now, is the door open so the paramedics can get in once they get here? Sorry.
Pay attention to his responses to her questions.
Is the door open so they can get in? Is the door open so the paramedics can get in the home? I'm going to go down. Is this a private home or apartment? It's a home. It's a home. It's 1509 Swan Street, Northwest. The person had one of our knives. The person that stabbed him ran out the door with a knife? I think so. Okay, anybody get any type of description of the person that came in the home? I have no idea. We have no description. We heard the chime and we heard the scream from our friend. Okay. And so we came running downstairs. We ran in. So you both was upstairs and your friend was downstairs? Yes. You heard the door open and then you heard the scream? I didn't hear the door open until after the scream, and then we ran down the stairs and we heard we have an alarm, and so the chime went off. Okay. Is the ambulance? We really need the ambulance. Okay, they en route now, ma'am. Go to the door. They should be pulling up any moment. Okay. I'm afraid to go downstairs. Okay, the person who's downstairs was the person that was assaulted. No, we're on the second floor. Okay, so somebody need to go downstairs and open the door for the paramedics. You're not sure if that person's still in the home or not? I have no idea. Okay, we have paramedics en route, okay? What time is it? What time is it at the moment? 23:54. It's 11:54, ma'am. 11:54. Yes. I mean, I'll stay on the line with you. I will stay on the line until somebody gets here, okay? I won't hang up. We need them right now. I'm not hanging up, but we need help now. Okay, they en route, ma'am. They are en route. Let me know when you hear the paramedic. Can you look out the window and see if you have no coming? I'm looking out the window and I see nothing. I see nobody. Okay, it seems like forever, but they are en route, ma'am. They're coming. Here they are. They're there? I'm going downstairs. Okay. I'll stand on the line with you till you open the door for the paramedics, okay? Help us. We have floor is stabbed. We're on our second floor. Ma'am? Really an emergency. I'm going to get married. He's hurrying. Ma'am, it's going to be okay.
Okay. Again, she did keep calling him ma'am. That was Victor. So that was Joe's. I'm going to try to get this picture off of here. The picture that I have up right now is actually of Robert, the victim in this, and his wife, Kathy. And that was Victor that was on the 911 call. So it was not a female. So don't let that confuse you there. Real fast. First thought about his change of demeanor when paramedics got there and he started sobbing.
Yeah. I was actually writing that down.
Because I hear people say things that I don't agree with, and I want to hear your opinion.
You're going to get frustrated. It depends. Sometimes when people are on the phone, they're concentrating so hard of getting help that they're talking, and then all of a sudden they see the ambulance, EMS, and they get upset. I don't know. I think I've been on the scene where people are already screaming and yelling. You go back, you listen to 911 recordings, and it's like that from go. From the time they get on the phone, they're yelling and screaming. And so I don't know. I just made a note of it. That was all. That it was interesting. His breathing increased, almost dramatically. And he began crying as he was trying to talk. And I could be wrong. I thought he said something to the effect of like, no, this is serious. Our friend needs help or something.
We're going to talk about it. And it was at the very, very end of the call. And he says, this is really an emergency.
Yes. Okay.
So this call I've listened to 4,000 times. I will say, I've heard people say that he was feigning emotion at the end there. Mm-hmm. And I disagree. Mm-hmm. And I'll explain why. So we have a couple of people. Again, this is a live YouTube show on Tuesday. So in the chats, we've got Davey is in the chat saying, why wasn't the caller downstairs to assess the situation? Crying that late into the call is rather off. Yeah. I agree with you. However, at that moment, if you didn't catch, the 911 dispatcher had said to him, is the door unlocked? Go downstairs and unlock it. Remember, this is a 3-level row house. Okay. So he had gone all the way up to the 3rd level because we're going to talk about why he wasn't on the 2nd level where the murder took place. She tells him to go downstairs and make sure the door's unlocked for paramedics. That's the first time he starts to get kind of sobby because he says, I'm scared. Because he said an intruder. So he said, I'm scared. I don't know if he's down there. Mm-hmm. So he does go downstairs. So by the time you hear him, when the paramedics actually get there, he was down there this time at her request, away from the victim to go unlock the door and look out. She said, look out the window. Do you see them coming? So actually in that moment, he was doing what she asked him to do. Mm-hmm. Now his emotion to me, it wasn't until he starts to, his breathing kind of starts to quicken as he sees the vehicles of the first responders. And as they park and start getting out is when he lets loose. To me, it's like a child. They can hold it together until they talk to their mom. Yeah. And then they start crying. I mean, if you see a kid who says they don't feel good and you say, it's going to be okay, it's okay. Do you want to just call mommy and see? Yeah. And they can start calling, oh, mom. And they start letting it loose. And to me, it felt like I don't know. That part of the call I find to be genuine emotion. I will be interested to hear some of you guys if you change your opinion after you hear a little bit more about some of these personalities and some of these people involved. But let's just go head to toe real quick on that 911 call. The first thing that we hear is he says, well, he changes back and forth. And there's a podcast called The Consult, and it actually features FBI behavioral analysis, former employees or former, that's what they did. And they break down some of this. And they even said in this, and I will agree, he changes pronouns in the sense of saying I and we. Mm-hmm. Most of the call is we. We heard this. We did that. We went here. Sometimes he says I. Now, if you listen to like the BAU's take on that, they will say that there's almost 2 truths. There's the story he's telling, and there's what he knows to be true. And that's how they look at the changing of the I and the we. But the first thing that got me right off the rip, and I know it did you as well, is when he said, there was an intruder evidently in our home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He doesn't say it with conviction. He certainly says it like he's been told. There was an intruder evidently. Did that one?
And a lot of that is we don't have a baseline, so we don't know how this person talks normally, or if they use that often. But yes, most people know. In this incident, once you get finished telling all the details, and someone has to pick up a phone and call 911, I don't know that they would say that because it should be apparent to them. I think it's one of those red flags. Doesn't mean he's guilty or not guilty. It's just it's an interesting phrasing of that. So.
Sure, and we've got in the chat, Greg is saying profiling innocent people through voice could convict plenty of people. That's why it's not hard evidence. It's not evidence at all. I fully agree. It's completely subjective. And that's, hence the back and forth. And we talk all the time. It's very difficult to assess a 911 call when someone is in a very traumatic, everyone is going to, situation, everyone reacts differently, of course. This is an interesting one because, like I said, we don't have a conviction in this murder. And this household, there were 4 men went to bed that night, and 3 of them are now alive. So we're getting through the weeds of all that. And the first way to do that is to go over this 911 call and just see if there are any inconsistencies or, like we said, change in inflection or emotion, which is always a little interesting to note when you put it a part of the whole puzzle. So, he does continue to talk about someone being in the house more so than he's talking about their guest is potentially stabbed in the bedroom of the home, right?
Yeah.
So she's asking, are they still in the house? Like, he talks about the intruder idea so much that she finally says, well, are they still in the house? And he says, well, I don't know. He finally starts to talk about Robert, and she says, is the door unlocked for the paramedics? And when she said, is the door unlocked for paramedics, he says, we don't know how they got in.
Yeah.
Which is not what was asked. Okay. He says, we heard the door and we heard the scream from our friend. And she said, oh, you heard the door. And he said, no, I heard the scream. Then I heard the chime on the door. So this would typically indicate, right, that the intruder has fled because, he's hearing the scream, he's hearing the door chime. But he stopped to articulate that point. Like, in the sense that he says, when she says, oh, you heard the door? He could have been like, yeah, I heard the chime on the door. But he said, no, I heard the scream, then I heard the door.
Yeah.
He will pull out and articulate and just kind of stress certain points within this call that are just a little interesting when you've got someone with 3 that we're going to learn about stab wounds to the chest in your office. So let's forget Victor for a moment on the phone. Just in general, does this sound like a 911 call you're used to hearing, in the sense that we have 2 other adult males that are alive, and, well, Victor's not the only one there with this man that's down, right? So you're not hearing anyone saying things like, where are they? Or get me a towel, or what did she say to do? He's not breathing. Help me. You're not hearing anything in the background.
Yeah. And there doesn't, when I say there seem to be a sense of urgency, like you're saying, he keeps going back to talking about whatever, a break-in, what he hears and that sort of thing. Not necessarily, these are the injuries. This is what I'm seeing. I made a note also, I guess he went upstairs and made the phone call.
Yeah.
So I made a note of, was he calling on a cell phone, or was he using a home line? And is there only one line upstairs? Why do you have to go up there? Normally, go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, I just have the answer to that for at least what they say is the reason. He says, and I'm going to read his interview with the police here in a moment. So he's going to detail what he says, like his version of events here. But he says that he started screaming. Victor, started screaming when he saw Robert, and that Joe, his husband, told him, go upstairs and call 911. So he specifically said, he told me to run upstairs and call 911. Now, he is fluid, which makes me feel like even if it were a home phone, it was a cordless one, because he does then from upstairs ventured back down to the second floor. Eventually, we know he goes to the main floor to open the door for the paramedics without getting off of the phone with her. So he goes upstairs per his account because, and Joe will corroborate this, that he said he wouldn't, like, basically wouldn't calm down. I told him to go upstairs and call 911. I don't know why you don't say just like step over there and call, or like call 911. Here, quit screaming, get out of the way. That's a very specific statement. But it is quiet. And I think that she goes through the motions of saying very specifically, like, is there blood? And he said there's a little blood on his stomach. And she says, now here's what you're going to do. And she instructs him step by step to get towels and apply pressure. If that one gets saturated, don't remove it. Add more, right? So, but he's not relaying this information to Joe, who in theory is the one who should be tending to Robert. By the way, haven't heard hide nor hair of Dylan yet. So we don't know if he's at the scene, if he's asleep in bed and never heard any of this. We don't know what's going on with Dylan. Okay. And so I think that that would be the lack of urgency that I'm hearing, like you said, in the sense of just the quietness of no back and forth, no give and go with Victor and Joe, the person even if Victor just can't keep it together enough to be in the room where it's taking place. Even more so, you'd think you'd hear them yelling back and forth because he can't answer her questions directly. So the one thing that really got me super sideways on this would be when he says, talking about the intruder again, the person had one of our knives. Like, he ran off with one of our knives. Okay, what? Like, how do you know that in this moment? Why is that what you're thinking about? You're still thinking about an intruder running off with one of your knives. You also just said a moment ago that the chimes would indicate that they fled. You also said that you're scared that they're in the house. So it's just there are a few things. I know that, excitement and trauma and stress and shock can, you might step on your words a little bit, but that's a very interesting thing, again, to point out. The intruder, or he had one of our knives.
Great follow-up question would be, and I'm sure they did it, so I'm not second guessing. I'm saying, like, this is an example where you take a 911 call and you use it to develop information or, for your interview. But to ask a question like that, hey, during the 911 call, you said they ran off whatever with our knife. What made you think of that? Because someone may go, yeah, I noticed that there was whatever, a knife block tipped over, and I noticed the knife was missing. And maybe if police stopped a guy in the neighborhood, he may have it, and you could catch the suspect. Like, there may be some reason behind that. If, and I'm not saying he is, but if he is lying, or they concocted a story, when you ask him that question, now it causes him to pause to think, oh, why did I? I know why I said it, but I
can't tell you why I said it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good point. Yeah.
So when she says, does anyone have a description of the person? And he says, we don't know. We didn't see him. But again, no back and forth. Like, so I would almost say, like, I didn't see anything. Joe, did you see anything? Right? Like, you're still heightened. And he even said he's so heightened he had to leave the room. But he's not heightened when it comes to conversation with the other man or men in the room. Okay. He said he was stabbed. It's in his heart. But when EMS gets there, there's a knife on the nightstand. Okay. So maybe Victor didn't see that knife when he said that the intruder ran away with his. Again, weird statement. But he said he was stabbed. It's in his heart. And so we're going to get back to that in a moment. One of the more strange things, I believe, is when he says he's hysterical. He kind of calms, and then there's a pause. It seems as though he might be like someone is kind of talking to him off air, like you can't hear their voice. And then he very plainly and very flatly says, what time is it? Yeah. And the dispatcher says, huh? Like right now? Because I think she's confused. And then he says, yes. And she says, it's 11:54 or whatever, 11:53, whatever she says. And then, like you said, and we're going to move on with the case, but the last thing on the 911 call is when he said, I can't believe it's real. He said, I can't believe this. It's really an emergency. And his voice like tilts up again. It's really an emergency. Almost like, not that he's surprised himself, but kind of like, oh no, like it really is, but also maybe it shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the 911 call for you. So this was, like I said, at 11:49 p.m. when he called. Paramedics arrived 5 minutes later. They were followed quickly by officers from the Metropolitan Police Department, or the MPDC. Joe Price took it upon himself to call Robert's wife, Kathy, and then Robert was rushed to George Washington University, where he was pronounced dead at 12:24 a.m. I will say that we'll talk EMS later and more specific medical stuff, but he was in a state of what's called PEA when they got there, meaning pulseless electronic activity. We've talked about that rhythm before. That's one that if you can be saved, that is a shockable rhythm, meaning they can put the defibrillator on, right? Shock you. And if whatever's going on with you can be saved, you can potentially come out of that and regain a normal heart rate. Unfortunately, Robert did not. He had succumbed to his injuries, which we will break down in a moment. But in all accounts, it's worth trying to treat. So they did what they were supposed to do by taking Robert and continuing to try to code him and give him meds and do all of these things. But since he didn't come out of it, we know probably at that time he was just about completely on death's door when they got there. So then later, and I'm only saying that to say later, prosecution investigators will say, there's no way to know that, right? You cannot anticipate the outcome of what was going to happen to Robert. But this is such a bizarre case. It's kind of like, oh, if we'd have just known, because, right, like to move his body, now we've moved such a major part of that crime scene, but it's exactly what you have to do. So that's just one that it is what it is, right? So that's what happens in the moments following that 911 call. So let's talk a little bit about this scene. So when the paramedics get there, they observe something kind of interesting. They walk in the front door. Victor let them in. Again, it's a 3-level row house. Okay. So the scene takes place on the second floor, the middle floor, and that's where the office was that had a pull-out couch where Robert was staying for the night. So the paramedics say that when they get there, and just like you've talked about, and the paramedics sure are used to emergent situations, right? The nature of their job. But they said that not only was there no fuss, no hysterics, I think quite usually, and you would agree, Brian, that, you're going to have, he's in here, up the stairs, let's, like, hurry up. He's on the second floor. He's in the office, right? Mm-hmm. He said that Victor instructed them upstairs. And as soon as they get upstairs, they turn the corner at that landing where they see Dylan, who is standing in a bathrobe, seemingly fresh out of a shower, a white, crisp bathrobe, and that he's not moving, he's not speaking. And when they say, where are we going? Where is the victim? Or where is this guy? Whatever. He says, not a word. And he just points. He points with his finger toward the direction of the room Robert was staying in, and then turns and walks in his bedroom and shuts the door. And so immediately EMS was like, I've never seen anything quite like that. For right now, until we know more, until we talk about more of this, we'll chalk that up to shock. Mm-hmm. We'll say he's traumatized, he's frozen, he's in shock. We can do that for now. Because otherwise that makes really not any sense. Mm-hmm. So detectives said that it was a very bizarre scene. In fact, they called it eerie. A detective said that the hair on the back of his neck stood up when he started talking to them and their demeanor. So he said that when he gets there, get this. So all three of them are now, or two of them, Victor and Dylan are in white bathrobes, and Joe is just in his underwear. Not a big deal that he's in his underwear. He'd gone to bed. That's not a big deal in and of itself. But when you start looking at these white bathrobes, which he eventually puts on, so you've got these 3 dudes sitting down eventually when cops start talking to them in white bathrobes. 2 of them, Joe and Dylan, that looked, detectives made a note, potentially like they had just showered. Hair semi-wet and slicked back. And robes. So this is just a very interesting scene. He said that there was no, like you said, it seemed to be a lack of sense of urgency on the 911 call. Victor was very hysterical. He was very emotional, but it didn't seem urgent if you can make the split between the two of those, right? Mm-hmm. So he said, the detective on the scene said that when he starts to talk to them, everyone is quiet, everyone is calm, No one really has much to say. And then as he starts to ask questions, Dylan decides to answer one or two. And he said that Joe gave Dylan a look that essentially meant enough. And the minute Joe gave Dylan that look, Dylan stopped talking and Joe continued to tell the story of what the events were that evening. Okay. So we already have EMTs and detectives saying like, I don't know, this is just, something unlike something we've seen before from witnesses, from friends of a victim, whatever. In fact, when Dylan was asked further about Robert later on, his words were quite clearly, I don't know, I hardly knew the dude.
Mm-hmm.
So take it for what you will. So the scene was, there was some blood on the bed, not a ton. So let me show you what we have here. So here's a picture, albeit a bizarre one, but it's got two, if you're just listening, there are two spots of blood, one kind of at the bottom of a pillow onto the bed and another one on the bed comforter. So Robert had been lying essentially on top of the comforter. The detective will say later that the pillow had just like a perfect indentation from a head. The sheets were not very ruffled. In the photo that we're looking at from the crime scene, the corner, the bottom left corner had been turned up and kind of folded. Otherwise, not what I think you would expect to see in like a stabbing death, meaning, you're going to fight, you're going to move around. Maybe there's some wrestling in that. None of that. And there's not blood everywhere. It's two very concise spots. And that's about all. So we know that nothing was disturbed in the home. Everything was where it had been. In fact, Robert had a really nice watch. His clothing, his wallet, everything was folded nice and neatly at the foot of the bed. We learned later that laptops, phone, nothing was taken. Jewelry, money, nothing was taken whatsoever. And we know that they immediately talk intruder. Victor did it on the 911 call, and then they do it as they talk to the detectives at the scene. They keep saying that there was an attempted burglary, that someone had, obviously gotten into their home and done this to Robert. Again, nothing was disturbed. There was no signs of forced entry, and nothing had been stolen. Okay, so let's talk about their backyard fence. So again, it's that row house, right? So all of the houses are boom, 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 front door, front door, front door, front door, right? So if someone is like, well, I guess I'm not going to go through there. I'm going to go in the back way, right? Well, the guys had left the back door unlocked seemingly this night. They never left the door unlocked. And if you know anything about downtown DC, you're not going to leave your back door unlocked, particularly when you're in a $1.2 million row house in this particular part of town. It's a great part of town. Crime is rampant. So, I think we know this. And so they knew that living there, but their back door was unlocked. But to access the backyard, like their little back courtyard, you have to actually scale a fence. There was a 9-foot fence in the back. Not extremely easily scalable, but okay, it's doable. But so this back fence had pollen. If you are not from an area in the country that has pollen, let me tell you about this magic yellow dust. This was in August, so almost worse, because for me, fall allergies are even worse. But depending on what's blooming, depending on what's going on, you will get pollen. And it comes down, so it sounds like there, I don't live in DC. I live in the Southeast, but it sounds like, pollen is pollen is pollen, and theirs is very similar. I know, for instance, here, our porch is painted black. When it's season where pollen is, it looks like you've taken mustard powder and covered it. It is fully dull yellow, and you can take your finger and just wipe it. I drive a black vehicle. It turns, like, people say don't get a dark car because it shows dirt too easily. Mm-hmm. Pollen. I shouldn't have gotten it because of the pollen here. So it turns yellow. The windshield's yellow. In saying that, though, it's very important because it's just like dust. So if I walk on my porch during pollen season, the actual imprint of my shoe fully, you could identify me based on the sole of my shoe walking on that front porch, right? So it gets disturbed and it leaves perfect, like snow or anything else, leaves perfect imprints. In saying that, investigators say that the backyard, the fence was covered in pollen. So where the guys ascertain that this would be intruder, right, hop this fence. There's a very small portion of the fence that you can hop. The rest of it is this kind of brick, whatever. There was pollen on it that had been undisturbed. There was no, handprint, footprint, smear, smudge in it whatsoever. So already that's just, it seems improbable that someone would come in from that direction. But even if they did, they happened to get there on the night, luckily enough that the door happened to be unlocked, and somehow did it in a way to not disturb the pollen on the fence. So you just start thinking in your brain, if you're thinking, even if you don't know what did happen, are you thinking intruder theory or not? So let's just keep that in mind as we continue to talk about the events that night. So we have a knife on the nightstand. So remember we said that when EMS gets there was a knife on the nightstand. In the 911 call, Victor had said there's a knife and it's in his chest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a knife on the nightstand. This knife matches a knife in their kitchen, like their knife block in the kitchen. So now, walk it back, we've got an intruder who comes in, doesn't have to break in, checks the door, it's unlocked, walks right in, walks through a chime, because it chimes when it's opened, and continues to walk through this chime, evidently weaponless, chooses to grab a weapon from the kitchen. Now you're grabbing out of the knife. I saw a picture of the knife block. There were other knives to choose from. The knife in question, let me show you what this looks like. This. Okay. That's the knife that was chosen from the knife block. If you're going with the intruder theory. It's a regular knife block. You guys have seen them. So there's a million, kind of like the smaller steak knives, a couple like a bread knife or whatever, and then a couple of the bigger, like the larger butcher type knives, if you will. Okay, so that knife, like I said, matched the one in the kitchen, the one that was on the nightstand. It did have blood on the blade. It did not have blood on the edge of the blade or on the tip of the blade. The blood was more like, if you look at this knife, where the bottom part, the edge, we'll call the sharp part is, that's not where the blood was found. And again, not at the tip of the blade. It was more along the top third to top half of the knife.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you can kind of see it there. If you look, I thought that was a shadow at first. That's just a black and white photo of the knife. So the darkness you see, there's a little bit there, but it's not on the tip. Whereas if you were to have stabbed someone 3 times with this knife, the only part that doesn't have blood on it is the very end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to talk about that as investigators go on to process the scene, what they kind of find then from that knife that might be a bit surprising to you. So everybody's going in for interviews. It's time for everyone to take a good old visit to the local police station. So I'm going to read you part of Victor's original interview. Okay, so everything that I'm reading in these next few pages, and then we'll discuss. Let's see here. I think that's all I'm going to read here. So it's a few pages. Bear with me, but it's very, very interesting because I want you to see if you can find any discrepancies here in his interview. So this is interview number 1 with Victor. Essentially, he sits down in the interview room. The police officer tells him why he's there, obviously. No one is under arrest. We've just got some questions for you. What happened tonight? And he starts with saying, I'm filming you. There's a camera there, a speaker here, et cetera, et cetera. And he does specify that it's 4:02 in the morning on August 3rd of 2006. Okay, so all of this happened on the evening of August 2nd. And now it's 4:02 the next morning. They've been up all night. They're tired. We'll take that into account. So he's asked what he remembers happened that night. And when he's asked that, Victor says, again, this is 911 Victor, right? The one on the call. Victor says, well, I had just gotten back from a business trip. I was in Denver and I got home around 6:30. When I got home, Dylan was home. He was exercising in his room and he told me that Joe was at the gym. So I changed clothes, unpacked a bit, and then went to the gym. I got home probably only about 35 minutes later. It wasn't long. So probably 7:15, 7:20. I went upstairs, took a shower. Joe was already home from the gym and Dylan was in the shower when I got home. And then I went upstairs and changed. We're having trouble with our shower in our master bedroom. So Joe was trying to rig a hose to see if he could make it leak again into the drain. And I went downstairs. Dylan had already started cooking dinner. I helped. We were having steaks, so we were in and out the back door. And while we were cooking dinner, I talked to a friend of mine who lives in Silver Spring. We talk about details a lot of times, but maybe he's a detail-oriented kind of guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who lives in Silver Spring, and the steaks were burning. So I ran out there and I got off the phone and we had dinner. We finished dinner. I don't know exactly what time. I'm guessing it was around 9:30. It was probably earlier than that because it was probably like 9:15 or so because we finished cleaning the kitchen. Just as we were finishing dinner, Joe remembered he had left the water running upstairs. I feel like that's weird. Mistakes can happen.
Mm-hmm.
This is type A. Everything is in order, Joe Price. So just keep that in mind. But either way, Joe remembers he left the water running upstairs. So he went up and evidently it was dripping again. So this is a word that Victor uses. Remember how we talked about that when he says there was an intruder evidently and it sounded odd? Yeah. Well, this is a word that Victor uses often. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Dylan and I went upstairs. Dylan went into his room. I went upstairs the rest of the way, talked to Joe. And that's when I went and watered the plants. I watered the ones on the roof first, and then I went downstairs all the way down to the main level and went out front and watered the front flowers. I came back in and went right upstairs to our bedroom, which is on the 3rd floor. By that time, it was probably like 9:45 or 10:10, something like that. We were at dinner. We were talking about how we wanted to watch a show called Project Runway. And so I went upstairs, started turning the television on and flipping channels, getting ready for bed, and I couldn't find the station. Joe came up because he was still working with the drain and told me what station it was on. We clicked over to it and found out we didn't have that station any longer because he had canceled part of the cable. So he went downstairs at that point, and I was just flipping channels, watching some other shows, and then he came back up probably about 10 or 15 minutes later and said, try it again. So we went to it, and the show was on. So we were both watching the show, and the phone rang, and it was Robert. I missed, because I had come down before then. I had come downstairs. Actually, it was probably when I was coming up the stairs after watering the plants out front is when I saw Dylan making the bed in the office. So it's like he's going back and remembering, wait, I didn't tell you what happened when I was watering plants. And I asked him what he was doing because I didn't know we were having anyone come over. And he said that Robert was coming over, that he was working late and wanted to just crash at our place rather than going home. And then I talked to Joe and I asked Joe and he said, yes, that's what Robert was coming over and they were going to have breakfast in the morning. So at that point is when I finished going upstairs and started watching TV. So again, was this an argument between the two of them? We talked about that a little bit earlier, but this could have caused a little bit of contention between the two of them. So we're watching the Project Runway show and the phone rings and it's Robert. And he says that he's on his way and he was talking to Joe. I was just hearing half of the conversation and Joe told him to just ring the doorbell when he got there. So he hung up. The call was only like a minute. I mean, it was a very short call. And Joe and I were watching TV then for a few minutes. And then Joe went downstairs and it turned out that he had come and Dylan had let him in. And so I stayed upstairs. I was already undressed and ready for bed. Probably about 15 or 20 minutes later at the most, absolute most, Joe came back upstairs. I'm guessing it was probably like 10 till, something like that, because there was a lot of commercials in this program. So he goes on to say, like, Joe gets back in the bed. He only saw the last few minutes of this program. He says that a couple of times. I will tell you, I feel like he's saying it in a way like he missed watching TV with me because he was downstairs talking to Robert. I may be reaching on that one, but the more we hear about kind of his idea of what was going on, not with Robert, like he didn't think that Robert had a relationship with his husband, but just that he and Joe were having some communication issues in this moment. Okay. So he says, then the show was over at 11. We were still watching the same channel. And I got up and brushed my teeth, came back to bed, and Joe was switching channels, looking at what was on. And he saw a show he wanted to see, and he was going to start watching it. We turned the lights out. When I went into the bathroom to brush my teeth, I took a Sudafed and a Unisom, because I had just got back from a trip and I was having postnasal drip. So he goes on I take this sleeping pill along with a medicine for my congestion, and kind of goes into detail about his postnasal drip and the pressure and all this stuff. And he says now it's probably 5 minutes after 11, 7 minutes after 11. It's pretty early still, and I roll over and went to bed. The lights were out and Joe still had the TV on. And like 2 minutes later, he turned off the TV and went to bed himself. So, okay. So the last little bit of that, he says, and then we woke up, I woke up to screams. So he goes back and forth here a lot, the we and I. Then we woke up, I woke up to screams, and Joe and I both jumped out of bed and ran to the door. On dash or on, no, that's not what he says. When we got back, were you not listening to Joe?
I was.
When we got to the door, Joe went out and flipped the light on, and we heard another kind of low scream while we were at our doorway. And we went running downstairs. Joe was right in front of me, and I looked in the room, and Robert was laying on the bed, kind of catty corner, and I started screaming. I mean, I was just hysterical. And Joe just told me to run upstairs. He goes, go back upstairs right now and dial 911. And he went over to Robert, and I went upstairs. And I called 911, and the operator picked up pretty quickly. And I told her I thought somebody had broken in the house, and that I thought somebody was injured, but I didn't at that time know what was happening. He says, I didn't at that time know what was happening. Okay. He also keeps saying somebody, not our friend, not our guest. He seems to be very easily distancing himself to the to Robert. Okay. Almost like this is Joe's friend Robert, not necessarily my friend Robert. So he says, I walk back while I'm on the phone with her to the top of our landing of our stairs, and I can see Joe. And Joe saying, get an ambulance here right away. Robert's hurt. So I, repeated it and that we needed help right away. And she talked to me for a little bit. And then she told me Joe had said he was stabbed. And when he says this, the detective stops him and says, wait, Joe said he was stabbed? That Robert was stabbed? And then Victor says, yes, because when I was at the stairs, because I told her that he was stabbed on the phone, and she told me to apply pressure to the wound. So I grabbed a towel and I grabbed my robe and I went downstairs. And at that point, Joe was already applying pressure to the wound. So it's almost like he sounds like he realized he messed up when he said that. When he said, and Joe told me he was stabbed. Because when he was on the phone with her, he said, he's a stab, there's a knife in his heart, all of this, right? All right, so he says he's in the doorway. He backed up a bit. I think he says Dylan. If I'm not mistaken. Yes, he says Dylan was in the doorway when he got there, and he said that Dylan backed up a bit and let him in. I gave Joe the towel. I was still on the phone with the operator. I was saying we need help right away. He says, Joe is saying, what time is it? What's taking so long? And it's almost like he had to get ahead of the weird, what time is it? I mean, again, I don't know, but the what time is it question, he said, Joe saying, what time is it? It was 11:43. And she said earlier again, she said, I had to go to the door to let the ambulance and the police in. I said, I didn't know if anyone was still in the house. So I went to the window and opened the shutters because they were completely closed. And I looked out. I couldn't see anything or anybody. And then he eventually talks about seeing emergency vehicles coming up. And he says, so then the cop says, was Dylan there when you got there? And he said, downstairs? And the cop says, yeah. And he said, well, when I came down the second time, when I was on the phone, that's the first time I saw Dylan. And he says, that was on the second floor. And he says, yes, it was on the second floor. Okay. And Victor says, it was right by the doorway to the office. And the cop says, okay. And what was he doing? And he said, he was just standing there. He said, what was he dressed like? He was in his robe. And then Victor says, when I screamed, when we came down the stairs the first time and I screamed, I thought I heard the door chime. And the cop says, okay, you thought you heard the door chime that time? Yes. But when you came down, you didn't see anybody. I didn't see anybody. Dylan wasn't there? No. Down on the first floor? No. He says, okay. And Victor says, I was the only one down on the first floor. Dylan and Joe were still in with Robert when I went down to let the ambulance in. And the cop says, no. But it was before that you heard the door chime? And he said, yes. It was much earlier. It was before I even called 911. It was when I was screaming. And he says, and you didn't see Dylan at that time down there, right? And he says, no. And he said, you didn't see Dylan anywhere? No. Okay, but Joe was with you? Joe was with me. And Joe was in the bedroom the whole time with you before you heard the screams? As far as I know, yes. Because you dozed off? I was asleep. I woke up to the screams. Remember, he says he fell asleep and 2 minutes later they hear the screams. Or 2 minutes later, Joe falls asleep and then they hear these screams. And I remember hearing the screams and jump, startling up. I could feel Joe doing the same thing. Okay. I'm sorry. That was a mouthful, but I wanted you to hear this I, we. And again, it's 4:00 in the morning, huge stressful event. He's going to stumble and stutter over words like that. That's all fine. But it's a little interesting, right? Like some of the way he goes through some of this stuff. What are your notes? What you got?
No, just making notes of the timelines in that sense in those 79 minutes, especially.
Well, we're going to talk about why it's 79 minutes. Go ahead, though.
But the timeline, and then going back and understanding fully what everybody's doing, leading up to when Robert would have been there and then going to sleep. I mean, we're talking about a very short window.
So very, very short window. And that's to be said, that he was going to get up early the next morning, go to breakfast with Joe. He had a long day at work and worked late. So I guess it makes sense that he kind of come in, say, hey, guys, take a drink of water and go to bed. But it is a very short window. That's, I don't know. Victor has a lot to say there. He does clarify a few things that are a little interesting. I think that we're going to talk about it in a moment. That chime is a little interesting. Mm-hmm. So then basically all of the men leave. Now, Joe's recount of this is he'll say things like, well, Victor was irritated with me for flipping channels. Victor didn't say that. He just said, I rolled over and went to bed, whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's all a little bit interesting. But then they all leave. Joe and Dylan and Victor had been interviewed, obviously, separately. They leave and they come back later that morning on their own. They come back voluntarily. And there's a time when you hear the cop saying, I'm going to go talk to Joe and be right back. And then Victor's asking about a lawyer. And so the cop is saying like, oh, hey, he says, oh, sorry, I was talking to Joe. He said, I just needed to get a couple of things. And he said, excuse me, Victor says, I want to get a lawyer. I guess they kept asking me the same thing over and over. And I just wanted to make it clear that like you guys understood. And the cop saying like, yeah, but you came here voluntarily. Mm-hmm. And he says, well, yes, and I'm happy to tell you what happened. And the cop says, okay, well, I just want to make sure that you know that you're like here voluntarily. You're not under arrest. And he says, yes, I'm here voluntarily. He said, okay. And he said, I'm absolutely exhausted. My adrenaline is gone. And so the cop's saying, okay, well, we can get through this. And so they do. So they continue to go on with an entirely, I didn't read you even half of the last one. And this one is, I think, longer than that one. So we're not going to go through it all. But he starts to talk to this cop and they're talking about kind of just more in detail the timeline, the events of the night, the dinner, the drinks, the conversation, all of it, the nuances within the relationship of those men. Let's see here. So he says, the next thing I know, I woke up with a scream. I did not hear the chime. I was sound asleep. So I heard these set of like really low, breathy grunt kind of sound, but it was loud. And so I jumped up. Joe jumped up beside me. We're both sort of, what is that? What is that? We run to the door of our bedroom and open the door and we heard another kind of grunt. And we flipped the switch on in the hallway. We both started running down the stairs. Joe was just in front of me. And then we got to the doorway of the office and saw Robert laying on the bed. So I just freaked out. His eyes were rolled back. He looked very pale. I couldn't. I saw his shirt was up a little bit and I didn't see a lot of blood, but I saw some blood. And then I just didn't look. I mean, I sort of I saw something and I just turned away really quickly and I started screaming. I mean, at the top of my lungs. And Joe just said, go upstairs and call 911. So I did that. I immediately went upstairs, dialed 911, talked to the operator. I told her that I thought somebody had broken into our house and that somebody may have been hurt because I didn't really know what had happened and I wasn't necessarily thinking. And she just was asking me questions. He says, Joe was over Robert and he was applying pressure to the wound already. The 911 operator had told me to take a towel and apply pressure to the wound. So I had gone into the bathroom and grabbed a towel in my robe when I came downstairs. So I think he means to say that he did that and then he came downstairs because it sounds contradictory because in the first one he says he went upstairs, he got those things and then came back down. This one sounds like he kind of got those items there. He says, and then I looked out the window again and I saw the ambulance pull up. I saw the fire engine. We know all of that. The last little pit here, and pretty soon we're actually going to wrap it up. It's getting late, and we're going to do a part 2 next week because there is a whole lot to discuss. you guys are getting kind of the this isn't boring, this is setting the scene, but it's about to ramp up out of control on part 2. So the officer says, let me ask you this. If you wanted to get into the back of your house, how would you do it if the gate's locked? Victor says, I really don't know. I've never had to do it. I mean, my assumption is that they climbed onto our car and sort of catapulted themselves over. The officer says, if we ruled that out, that they didn't do that, then what? He says, I don't know if you can. I mean, I don't know whether you can hoist yourself up. I know it's a lot easier to get out because of the ledge from the brick wall. And the cop says, let me ask you this. If you or somebody ran down the steps, would you hear it? Remember, we talked about those creaky steps, right? Mm-hmm. And he says, I would think so. And he said, well, did you? He said, no, I did not. And he said, you didn't hear that at all? And he says, I heard this, like the cry or the screams or whatever they were, but they were low. I mean, like very low. I mean, like when I screamed, I got hysterical. I was like pretty high pitched screaming and loud screaming. What I heard that woke me was like a breathy kind of, That was very different. And the cop says, right. So, couple of things here. On page 6 of the first interview, Victor says he woke to screams. He never says, at some point he said he heard something a little bit lower, but he said, I woke to screams. They were loud. He said, Joe and I both did. Then he says again about hearing screaming. Mm-hmm. On this one, he says, well, when I say scream, I mean, like when I scream, I'm hysterical and high pitched. What I heard was low and breathy. Okay. Mm-hmm. So could this have been, and don't think I'm out in left field when I say this, because part 2 is going to reveal why I would be saying this. Could this be even potentially the idea to incur the theory of an intruder that is stabbing Robert, and these are the noises that are being made downstairs, kind of some muffled grunts. Mm-hmm. That would also come with a struggle. That would come with a fight, and that would not be consistent with our crime scene. Or could this be the sound of someone pleasuring themselves or someone else in that bedroom downstairs? Mm. And you know where this case heads, so you can assure people that I'm not wildly off my rocker when I say that. We are going to get into BDSM. We are going to get into alt porn sites. We are going to get into everything under the sun and the DNA that was found, where it was found, and whose it was. And I will tell you that these 3 men were not charged with murder, but maybe not why you think. So we'll leave it at that. We're going to come back to a part 2. Definitely, if you're just coming in at the end here, take a listen to this one, take some notes, and get ready, because next week is going to, like I said, the websites, the toys, the equipment, the nuances of relationships, impregnation of other women from the lights. It goes on and goes on and goes on. Mm-hmm. Do you have any questions?
I do not.
I just realized that we've been going for an hour and a half, and we've probably got at least that left. So I feel like this would be a good time. Yeah. I hate to abruptly switch it up and do the part 2, but we're going to have to, because I really want everybody fresh and ready to go next week when we get into these gory details, and gory are they ever. Either way, though, we are so happy to be back live. Last week we filmed ahead of time, if you remember, so we weren't able to be in the live chats because some of the words that we used you can no longer use on a YouTube live, even if it's a true crime podcast. I wish there was some caveat for that or a loophole. It would make a lot more sense. Because if you do, then they will drop you. And if you incur whatever, like these, if you get slapped on the wrist, whatever, a few times in however many months, they'll scrub your channel. So while my subscribers are building very slowly, but surely, I don't want it to be taken away. So, come back and listen to Andrea Up Late on Spotify or iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can always watch us live on YouTube on Tuesday nights. We'll be back next Tuesday night. And you can follow me on Instagram on Andrea Up Late. Again, I will put pictures and all these other things. What are you laughing about over there?
Nothing.
Are you laughing?
No, I was smiling. I was looking at you.
You can. That's really nice. Do I have something in my teeth?
No, you're on my camera.
So you can also follow Brian. I don't think I said it this show, but if you're new here, Brian Sanders is a retired homicide lieutenant. So that obviously can provide a lot of insight and wisdom to a lot of these things when we discuss investigations and things like that. So that's always fun to kind of pick his brain on these things. He's also a lot more diplomatic than me when it comes to talking. Not really. I try to do my best. But you doing good?
Yes.
You got some classes coming up?
I do have classes coming up. If you go to the Disruptors with BrianSanders.com, I've got 3 separate dates on there. I'll be teaching in Wilmington, North Carolina, doing gang encounters course that I've designed and taught for several years now. And then on that side as well, had virtual classes, 2-hour block videos, that sort of thing. Just check it out. And still plugging away with the Disruptors with Brian Sanders podcast. And I think I will be posting a new episode tomorrow. I did one last week with Joey Briggs.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. I was catching up on the comments. I do a bad job of telling the story and do it. You did. That was a great show, in fact. Everybody take it and listen to that. Like he said, you can follow him at Brian Sanders Disruptors on Instagram. And the Disruptors with, is it still being
Brian Sanders?
With Brian? Oh, I'm so bad at this. I don't know. The Disruptors with Brian Sanders.
That's it.
And then just Brian Sanders Disruptors?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're just flip-flop. Why haven't I remembered that earlier? That's easy enough.
I don't know.
Follow him on those. He's also got a YouTube channel of the same name. And he does have really actually super cool guests. Lots of band members, lots of just kind of fun stories, wild stories. So go take a listen to that. And gosh, it's already the end of September, well, mid-September. My goodness. All right, this year's flying by. All right. Well, we really appreciate you guys. We love you. Give us a like, rate, review, whatever. I mean,
they do it right now. They can do it right now.
Yeah, you can do it right now.
Yeah.
You can totally do it right now. Just like, all right, guys. Well, again, much love. We appreciate you guys. And do you want to tell them good night?
Yes. Y'all take care.
That's your favorite part of the show.
Yeah. Always get awkward.
All right. Until next time, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Good night, y'all.